Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Story Behind the Shot. I'm excited today to have Matt Bruce with me here with this beautiful Avocet photo. How's it going, Matt?
Great. Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, what species is this?
This is an Andean Avocet. They have a pretty restricted range, like through, the Andes Mountains, but they're a
Yeah.
lot like ours, but they're not quite as colorful, but it was kind of one of my targets for my trip down there. I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's it. I mean, let's get right into it. I'd love to hear the story behind the shot. What brought you going to there in the first place? And how did you go about sort of, it sounds like a little bit targeting this species?
Well, it's funny. I had gone to see. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about like Pinky the flamingo over in like the Panhandle of Florida.
Yeah.
Before Hurricane Idalia came in and dumped flamingos all across the eastern U.S.
Yeah.
I think there were flamingos in like Pennsylvania, but before that, this was like one of the few consistent flamingos that you could go and see, like a wild American flamingo.
Okay.
That bird had been blown in by another hurricane like 5 years earlier, and I'll try and keep this part of the story kind of short. But my wife Casey and I went out there to see that bird and photograph it. And then we were thinking about it. We had seen flamingos in several other places. We had seen
Yeah.
them in like Africa. We had seen two species over there. We had seen Andean and Chilean on a couple other trips in the past.
Okay.
And I was looking into it and I figured out there's only one species that we hadn't seen, and that was the James's flamingo. I should have given you a photo of that too, but when we discovered that we hadn't seen that flamingo, it seemed like basically as good of an excuse as
Yeah.
any to make a trip out of it, right?
Nice.
So that was sort of the inspiration for it,
Okay.
and we decided that we would. They only occur in a very small area, like where Chile and Peru and Bolivia come together,
Hmm.
and Argentina. But it's a very small range. I actually thought that species was extinct until like 1950 something,
Wow.
and it was rediscovered. But that was sort of the inspiration for the trip. But it was definitely not like our main focus. And that was
Sure.
just like, if you need an excuse for a trip, why not, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But basically, we ended up just renting a 4x4 camper. I think you've got a picture of that too.
Yeah.
Just like a really simple little like slide in, camper on a truck.
Nice.
Had everything we needed, like a little stove, sink, solar power, inverter to charge camera battery is probably most important.
Yeah.
And it was comfy enough. And we drove that thing from Santiago, that's the capital city of Chile.
Okay.
Um, yeah, you've got the route there. You can see that's the northern part of Chile that we
Yeah.
were driving through. So we started down near Santiago, spent a couple days in the Andes Mountains just to the east of Santiago before we drove west and then up the shore there.
Yeah.
All kinds of habitats in there, by the way. You can
Wow.
see this is like a Google Earth image, and you can see that it's green down near Santiago. It's
Yeah.
actually kind of like scrubland. And then we drove up towards the coast, and you can see how it just like it's a gradation. It just goes drier and drier as we head
Yeah.
north. And then when you get into the that dry section up north there, that's the Atacama Desert. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that on like David Attenborough shows and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's debatably the driest desert on Earth, other than
Wow.
the Antarctica and the polar deserts. Um, but we the part at the end there, that is roughly the location where that red marker is. That's roughly the location of that avocet.
Wow.
That is right on the border of the Atacama Desert and what they call the Altiplano ecosystem, which is that just translates to high plain. So it's like
Okay.
this really high Andean plain. And we were right on the border of that, though we were still in the desert. So
Hmm.
you've kind of got where two habitats come together. It can be, a great thing for the kinds of birds you see, the kind of biodiversity you see. So
Yeah.
we had some sort of Atacama type birds and we had some Altiplano birds all in that area. But in that area, you've got these really fertile bogs. It's all super dry desert. The area we spent the most time in was like I think they get like 3 inches of precipitation a year. So it's not
Wow.
like super, super dry, like a little bit to the west. But it's still, I mean, it's crazy dry.
Yeah.
So the only like moisture that this area gets in this desert is, and if you go to the next image, I think you've got there, you can see this bog we're talking about. And there are taller volcanic mountains all
Yeah.
along the sort of the horizon there. And when rain and snow and whatever falls on those mountains, it runs down and streams and into these valleys. The valleys
Gotcha.
get almost no rain, but that water that runs off of those taller peaks comes in and creates these really lush wetlands. And these wetlands, it's like it almost feels like a pineapple. They're super like it's just all this spiky grass, really
Oh, no
short
kidding.
grasses. There are some taller grasses in there, but really unique environment. It's like
Yeah.
nothing I've ever seen before. Of course, I'm based out of Florida, so
Yeah.
totally unique for me. Um, but you've got those mountains, and I had done a lot of research on this trip.
Sure.
It was probably my most thoroughly planned trip that I've done. I had a bunch of target species. I was like going on Google Street View and planning angles and stuff. When I got
Wow.
to location and figuring out where the sun's going to rise and set and all
Yeah.
that. But that only really goes so far.
Sure.
I had really high hopes for this spot, and it was a great spot, but there were some challenges with it. Those mountains you see on the horizon, roughly like that far to the right mountain in that image, that's about east northeast thereabouts. And in the
Okay.
southern hemisphere, that's where the sun rises. It's just a little bit north of east, right? Opposite of the way it is up here.
Yeah.
But the sun would rise behind that mountain. And
Bummer.
I'm from Florida, so we don't really have the tallest thing is just like, the tree line, and
Yeah.
that's like 60, 70 feet, right? So I don't have a ton of experience photographing in places with topography.
Yeah.
But the sun, when it rises, it takes like 2 hours after sunrise for the sun to actually crest over the top of that volcano. And then you have instant hard light
And there's no
on
humidity
everything.
to cut down anything. Like it's powerful
Yeah,
sun.
it's
Yeah.
just instant heat haze, instant hard light.
Bummer.
So but it wasn't all bad. If
Yeah.
you look to the far left of the picture there's actually a little bit left of the frame.
Uh-huh.
There's a road that kind of cuts through this wetland. There's a tiny bit of marsh like to the left out of
Okay.
frame, like left of the road and out of frame. There's a little bit more marsh, but that area, there's just enough topography there to where most of that stuff is in shade at sunset.
Ah.
In fact, most of anything you can access is in full shade as you get within like 2 hours of sundown.
Nice.
So then you've got like strong light on those distant mountains, and your subjects are going to be in shade. When it's still like a couple hours out from sunset, you've got just really hard light on those distant mountains, and then you've got total shade on the birds up
Okay.
close, like where you can actually access them. So it was really tough to balance the light there. So it seemed like one of the few opportunities we had was basically to get there just at that sweet spot where the sun was just about low enough on the horizon to where you just had that really dim, like orange glow on
Yeah.
those mountains in the background. So it's still brighter than, my foreground where my subject is,
Yep.
but you can deal with it. It's,
Sure.
it's a fairly balanced exposure.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
actually, yeah, and I love that look, when you
Me
can
too.
get the subject in shade and you've got like something lit up in the background and
It's
you get
beautiful,
that,
isn't it?
it is, and I'm a sucker for complementary colors. When you get like blue water with,
Yeah.
the orange in the background and you get that kind of color contrast, can't beat it. But this spot, I tried to get there just about every evening. We were there for
Okay.
probably 4 days total on our trip.
Nice.
And the another hang up we have with this location is the prevailing winds in this region. They come from the ocean
Yeah.
over on the west of us, and they blow towards those mountains you see over on the right. So
Okay.
they blow from west to east. And in the morning, at least while I was there, those winds were pretty mild in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like most places, it's
Yeah.
windier in the afternoon,
Yep.
but the wind would really pick up speed and was really blowing by sunset time. Um, so it seemed like the areas you could access from this road on the west side of this wetland, they were full of birds in the morning. But
Yeah.
then when you get to the evening,
Oh.
those exposed ponds, exposed to wind, the
Yeah.
birds just didn't want to get all blown around. So they
Yeah.
would be, I'm sure, just in like little sheltered coves and
Totally.
behind clumps of vegetation or whatever. So you go there when the light is in that sweet spot, and then all the birds are pretty much hiding.
Oh my goodness.
Um, so I was thrilled when I saw that avocet. I think I had just come from trying to photograph rayas, which are like these really big ostrich-like birds.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was spending a lot of time with them. This is in a separate bog, like 15, 20 minutes away,
Gotcha.
and I kind of lost track of time, and I spent probably too much time with them. And then by the time I finally got here, we were really getting close to that sweet spot when that light was going to be just right to get these kind of shots.
Yeah.
And the last couple days I had been here at that time, I just could not find a bird that I could access without breaking rules and that kind of
Yep.
thing. So when I spotted this avocet, that was one of my targets for the trip because this is like a regional endemic. It's a bird I'd
Yeah.
never photographed before. I had only seen them just on this trip, and I had seen them a couple of times, like way off, but I hadn't been able to actually photograph one.
Gotcha.
So I was pretty excited when I saw one,
Yeah.
and luckily this one was like right on the edge. There's like just a maybe 100 feet between the road and this and the pool where this avocet was
Okay.
hanging out, and there were all these piles of dirt around, and it looked like when maybe there's road construction and there's
Sure.
extra filled dirt, they just kind of dump it off to the side.
Yeah.
So I figured that this bird, I waited, I did this like army crawl thing. I was going to go between these two clumps of like these two mounds of dirt. They're
Yeah.
maybe 6 foot, just mounds of dirt. There's all kinds of stuff piled up there. And I'm army crawling between two of them. So I'm using one of those piles of dirt to kind of block the view,
Sure.
that line of sight between me and the bird, so I'm not
Yeah.
scaring the bird. And I army crawl in, I get in position, I'm waiting on the bird. I can kind of peek up over the top of that
Nice.
of one of those mounds of dirt and see that she's over there. And I'm waiting there, and I start to feel a little bit of like moisture. If you're laying at the edge of a water body, you
Yeah.
expect for some of that to leak through your clothes, and you start to
Yeah.
feel that moisture. But then I started feeling like, my skin felt a little weird, right?
Oh
It's
no.
not like what you normally expect. Um, and then I started like sniffing the air, and I'm like, it kind of smells a little funny too. It's kind of
Yeah.
metallic, chemical smell. I don't know what that is.
Wow.
And then, I've got a science degree. I thought I could figure this out. I did a little taste test. Just put my tip of my tongue to the soil there, and then instantly it was like terrible. Just like I don't know what it was, but it just made my whole tongue go numb right
Oh
away. It's like
jeez.
I'm like, yeah, this is definitely not just regular lake dirt. This is
Yeah.
something different.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, I'm laying there. I'm like, I'm starting to put two and two together. I'm like, wait a second, didn't I hear there was a retired mine over there on the other
Yeah.
side of the road? And then I kind of, was figuring, okay, well, could this be some kind of mining waste or tailings or something like that?
Yeah.
So, I started freaking myself out, and I started feeling like, my skin is starting to burn now at this point,
Wow.
actually like burn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, it's not too bad yet.
Oh man.
I've had some mild chemical burns in the past. I'm peeking over this little mound of dirt, looking at this avocet, and I think it's a female, but she was over there, just like preening and just kind of hanging out.
Sure.
My sun's starting to dip down behind the horizon behind me. I'm losing light. My skin's burning,
Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
like, okay, please, just
This
just
is
walk this
crazy.
direction, would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and finally she did walk out into a nice spot, and I was able to get some shots. And she did walk. Yeah, you got the close up too. She walked actually really quite close to me.
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
But yeah, it was it was a little bit of a scary experience at
No
first.
doubt.
I was kind of freaking myself out, but basically, I got a few shots. I wish I could have spent a little bit more time with this bird. But really, my sun was starting to go away by the time, I actually got some
Gotcha.
shots, and it all worked out fine.
So
So
no
after
lasting
I,
results from the chemicals or
well,
anything?
after I got done photographing her, I ended up, trying to be respectful of her. I didn't want to, scare her off. I'm like slowly army crawling back while my skin is like on fire at this point.
Oh,
Trying to get to where I can like, do like just like a
the
hunched over like
crouch
crab
run.
walk
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
kind of
Uh-huh.
run back. So I ended up I ran back to the camper and just like stripped down and did like, sponge bath and tried to
Yeah.
get whatever this was off. No lasting effects, but I did have a few days like it was like basically a sunburn. So I had like I
Wow.
was just red,
Yeah.
everywhere. It ruined my clothes. It bleached my clothes out, whatever it was. So
Jeez.
there was like bleach stains on everything. And yeah, I just had like, it was like a sunburn, just
Yeah.
peeling and redness and no big deal.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. The things that we do for
Maybe,
photos
hopefully it
sometimes.
wasn't carcinogenic. We'll find out in 20 years, right? But
Yeah. Oh man. That's
yeah,
rough.
it was a new experience.
Dude,
It's
the
a
this
lesson to be always aware of your surroundings, right?
definitely, yeah. This more scenic photo though, I really really love this, Matt. That habitat is just beautiful. The grasses are pretty, and I love that you even caught a little bit of like, is that like, I guess maybe like cloud shadow on the hillside, or is it like a crease in the mountain?
That is where two hills kind of come
Okay.
together, and it's just a little bit of the topography. You can see there's just
Yeah.
like a shadow from one hill to the other, that kind of thing.
It just adds a nice little element to it. And I love how it's like pointing in towards the bird, like it just all really works so well together. And you have the full color palette, the water, the grass, the brown, it's just everything there. And yeah, absolutely stunning.
Awesome, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And so here's the original straight out of camera. What were the decisions you made with editing this one? What was the direction you were trying to go with that? It didn't look like you had to do much, huh?
Not a ton on this one. And by the way, my horizon was atrociously crooked
As we
on
all
this.
do. I still haven't figured out
But
how to take a level photo.
yeah. But yeah, aside from that, yeah, I cropped it as straight as I could.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I let's see. I believe I basically lifted the whites over the whole image. I
Yeah.
did a gradient over the orange part, above the
Yep.
bird, because when I lifted the whites, it kind of blew some of the highlights a little bit, and so I
Gotcha.
just toned the highlights down in the gradient. And then I did a little bit of masking on the front of the bird. You can see she is a little bit brighter, so I think I probably just
Sure.
lifted the exposure a little bit, maybe the whites, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I believe I don't know if I touched like saturation. Canon cameras, with Adobe, there I have all kind of color issues, so I've got like presets that I use where I've color
Okay.
corrected. So I applied some of that, and that kind of fixed up some of the colors.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's about it. I think not a whole
I'd
lot
say
there.
so. I mean, it looks like a very clean edit. Yeah. And you can see how it just was not far at all from the original shot there. Just beautiful colors to begin with. And a wonderful, like you said, that balance of golden light, just making that hillside glow orange compared to the foreground, which gets exaggerated when you white balance everything properly in that foreground. It's just such a wonderful color combination with
Yeah,
the
I do
cool
love
tones
that
and the warm
combination.
tones. Yeah, I love it, man.
Always something good to look for.
It definitely is. So, how long was the entire trip for you? I forget what you said in the beginning.
Let's see. I don't think I said it. 2.5 weeks.
Nice.
There were some really good spots we stopped on the way up, and we spent, I think, 4 days in the morning, something like that, in this general area.
Yeah.
In this general area, for anybody who's at all familiar with that region, San Pedro de Atacama is sort of a tourist town. That's maybe 2 hours south of this, but
Okay.
from there you can access several lagoons and bogs and that kind of thing. So there were several lagoons and bogs that we would kind of bounce back and forth between.
Okay.
This was by far the prettiest one, though, with like
It's
the nicest
beautiful. I
backdrop.
mean, I love this. Just seeing it. I mean, what an oasis in the middle of that habitat, huh?
I know yeah, it is just a whole nother world down there. And everything, if you're not looking at the bog, it's just like that stuff on the sides. It's just like rocks and sand and desert, but it's beautiful. There's a lot of really cool, valleys and canyons and stuff. There's
Yeah,
really interesting geology that I didn't even get a chance to really experience as much as I would like to, but it's a really unique area.
that's so cool, man. Yeah. Well, beautiful shot. Sounds like an amazing experience. You got one hell of a story from it, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. And seriously, I love the image. It really shows off the habitat well, and it's great that you were able to also get a beautiful type portrait. So you definitely got like the nice mix of showing the habitat and showing the bird from this outing.
Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, I always try to, especially when it's a new species, I try to get just a variety to sort of build a portfolio. I
Yeah.
always prefer those sort of environmental, because
Oh,
it
I know you do.
really what tells the story of the bird, and you know this better than anybody, is showing the context in which the bird lives. And
Yeah.
that's always the priority. But, sometimes I will be photographing a bird like this, with the bare lens, and I'll throw like a 2x teleconverter on and frame up something tight and get like more of like a field guide shot, and
Yep.
I'll just try different things. But in this case, I think she actually walked up to me. I didn't need
Nice.
a teleconverter for this one.
Hey, you can't beat that when it works out, huh? The one bird
But you know
opportunity and
what?
you got everything.
I wish I had more time there because you saw
Sure.
how gorgeous those mountains were in the background.
Right?
And if I could have approached this situation with something like, 150, 200 millimeters,
Yeah.
maybe turn that vertical. You needed
Yeah.
about 100 millimeters to get those mountains.
Oh,
Because
wow.
I did get some shots of some of the other animals out there, not a lot of birds, but some of the other wildlife
Okay.
with those mountains in the background. But you needed about 100 millimeters for a horizontal image to get that stuff in there.
Wow.
And I wish I could have gone in there with like, and either tried like, 150, 200 millimeters vertical or 100
Yeah.
millimeters horizontal and gotten more of those mountains in the background. But it's just one of those things when you've got 4 days and you
Yeah.
get like one opportunity, which one are you going to pick up, the 500 millimeter or the 100
Totally.
millimeter, or, whatever it is.
Yep. It,
But I don't think I would have, there's a lot of weedy stuff in here too. Uh,
yeah.
so it probably wouldn't have even worked out, if I had taken a wider angle. But I would love to have spent another week there, playing with that.
Yeah, definitely. That is one of the big challenges of the travel thing. It's like the limited time, the limited experience. You don't get to sort of hone and try again and, kind of check things off the list. I got the tight portrait. I got the medium length telephoto. Now let me try that. You can only
Yeah,
do so much in the limited time. And I just like you, I'm sure I love traveling and seeing new things, but that is certainly one of the downsides of it is you got
yeah,
to do what you can in a short period of time.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, those opportunities are fleeting for sure. You got to make the best of them.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, it looks like an amazing trip. Sounds like an amazing trip. And
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
blast.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share the story of the shot.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, keep it up, man, and we'll see you out there. All right.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right.